The Galactic Council chamber was a monument to peace. Carved from starstone and suspended in the void between three suns, it had stood for 10,000 years as the center of civilized space. Here, wars were prevented. Treaties were signed. Species coexisted. Today that legacy was about to die. Orkash, known to most simply as Oak, strode through the massive archway with the confidence of someone who believed himself a genius. His chitinous plating gleamed under the prismatic light, each segment polished to perfection. His forearms moved in practiced gestures of diplomatic superiority as he approached the central podium. The council representatives watched him with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. 12 species, 12 civilizations, all gathered in the curved amphitheater that floated at the galaxy's political heart. Oak's mandibles clicked in what his species considered a smile. "Esteemed council," he began, his voice amplified through the chamber's acoustic perfection. "I stand before you as the architect of our greatest diplomatic victory in 3 centuries. Silence. The kind that makes scales itch and feathers ruffle. For years," Oak continued, warming to his subject, "we have debated the human problem, their expansion, their unpredictability, their refusal to conform to established galactic norms. Well, I have solved it." Council member Thress, a floating crystalline entity from the Lumina Collective, pulsed an uneasy orange. "Diplomat Oak, what have you done?" Oak's mandibles spread wider. "I have given humanity exactly what they crave: conflict, purpose, an enemy worthy of their enthusiasm." The chamber stirred. Whispers in a dozen languages, the scraping of claws on stone, the hum of bioelectric concern. "I spent 3 months touring Earth," Oak declared, his voice rising with pride. "I visited every major nation. I studied their history, their symbols, their precious traditions, and then," he paused for effect, "I insulted every single one of them." The whispers stopped. In their place came something worse, the sound of 1,000 species holding their breath. "I mocked their flags," Oak went on, oblivious to the horror spreading through the chamber. "I laughed at their ancestors. I desecrated their monuments. I told the Americans their democracy was a joke. I told the Chinese their history was fiction. I told the Russians they were weak. I told the Europeans they were irrelevant." Council member Vex, a reptilian strategist from the Kron dynasty, slowly rose from his seat. His voice came out as a hiss. "You united them." "Precisely." Oak's enthusiasm was genuine. They were fragmented before, bickering among themselves, but now they have a common enemy. They will wage war against us, and in that war, we will guide them, control them, use their aggression to stabilize the unstable regions. It's brilliant. "It's suicide," someone whispered. Oak turned toward the voice. It had come from Ambassador Lyris, a being whose species had existed since before most stars in the chamber had ignited. Her form was difficult to focus on, something between shadow and light. "You don't understand the achievement here," Oak protested. "Humanity needed direction. I gave it to them." Lyris drifted forward, and the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. "There is an old saying in the archives of the precursors. It has been translated into every known language, carved into warning beacons at the edges of dark space. Do you know what it says?" Oak's confidence wavered. "I don't deal in superstition. It says, 'Never unite humanity against you.'" The words echoed through the chamber like a death knell. Oak laughed, a chittering, nervous sound. "That's absurd. They're one species among thousands. They have no ancient weapons, no reality-warping technology. They're primitives with guns and missiles. They're survivors," Beck said quietly. "Every species in this chamber evolved on a garden world. Gentle gravity, stable climate, abundant resources. Do you know where humans evolved?" Oak said nothing. "A death world," Bex continued. "A planet that tried to kill them every single day. And they didn't just survive, they conquered it. Then they looked at the stars and decided to conquer those too." Thress pulsed a deep, terrified red. "They turned their own atmosphere into a weapon. They split the atom for power and warfare in the same century. They have wars named after the entire planet because they fought on every continent simultaneously. Enough! Oak's voice cracked across the chamber. You're acting like frightened hatchlings. They're just... An alarm cut him off. Not the gentle chime of a scheduled recess. Not the soft pulse of an incoming message. This was the sound of the defense grid activating. Every holographic display in the chamber flickered to life, showing the same thing. A massive signature dropping out of faster-than-light travel. It was big, moving fast, and it was heading straight for them. What is that? Oak demanded. Ambassador Lyris's voice was quiet, resigned. That is a Terran dreadnought. The displays resolved into clearer images. The ship was a brutal thing, all angles and armor, bristling with weapons that looked like they were designed by engineers who had given up on elegance and focused entirely on ending civilizations. This is a mistake, Oak said quickly. They don't know we're in here. This is council space. They wouldn't dare. The communication console came alive. No request for dialogue, no diplomatic preamble. Just 3 words in perfect galactic standard, spoken in a human voice that sounded almost bored. We know you're there. The chamber erupted into chaos. The reckoning. The chaos in the council chamber was unlike anything in its 10,000-year history. Species that had never raised their voices were shouting. Beings that had evolved beyond physical fear were trembling. And in the center of it all stood Oak, frozen as the weight of his mistake finally began to settle on his chitinous shoulders. Activate the shields, someone screamed. Send a diplomatic signal. Evacuate the station. Council member Vex raised, one clawed hand, and his voice cut through the panic with the authority of a species that had survived 3 extinction events. Silence. The chamber obeyed, though the fear remained thick in the air. Vex turned to Oak slowly. You wanted to understand humans. Let me tell you what you've actually done. He gestured to the massive holographic display where the Terran dreadnought hung in space like a predator sizing up prey. That ship is called the Consequences. Do you know why humans name their warships? Oak's mandibles trembled. To intimidate? To remember, Lyra said softly. Every ship name is a promise, a memorial, a warning. That one is named after what happens to species who make humans angry. The communication console crackled again, the same human voice still eerily calm. Attention Galactic Council. We are here for Diplomat Orkash. Surrender him within 10 minutes, or we will assume you are complicit in his actions. Your cooperation is appreciated but not required. 10 minutes. Oak felt something he hadn't experienced in his entire diplomatic career. Genuine primal terror. You have to protect me, he shrieked, his composure shattering. I have diplomatic immunity. This is council space. They can't just... They... Can... Thress pulsed, now a deep violet of mourning. Because you broke the one rule that every species with survival instincts understands. You didn't just attack humanity. You united them. Vex pulled up another display. This came through intelligence channels 3 hours ago. We didn't realize the significance until now. The hologram showed Earth, but not the fragmented political map that Oak had studied for his mission. This was something new. Every nation's flag was still visible, but they were arranged in a pattern around a new symbol, a simple blue marble with a ring of stars. Underneath, text in 100 languages all saying the same thing. Terra United. Effective immediately. Impossible, Oak whispered. It takes them decades to agree on anything. I was there for 3 months. They were still arguing about trade, deals and borders, and... You gave them something more important than their disagreements, Lyris interrupted. You gave them a common enemy. Every human diplomat you insulted went home and shared the story. Every monument you desecrated became a rallying point. Every nation you called weak proved you wrong by standing together. Vex's display shifted to show military movements. The Americans deployed their Pacific Fleet. The Chinese mobilized their orbital defense network. The Russians activated weapons systems we didn't know they had. The Europeans united their space forces for the first time in history. Africa, South. America, Asia. Every continent contributed ships, soldiers, resources. In 72 hours, Lyris added, Humanity went from 200 nations to one species. You accomplished what their own leaders couldn't do in centuries. You gave them a reason to stop fighting each other and start fighting together. The communication console spoke again. The human voice had lost its bored edge. Now it carried something sharper. 9 minutes. Oak turned to the council representatives, his 4 arms spread in desperate supplication. Please, send them a message. Tell them it was a diplomatic strategy. Tell them I was trying to help them. Help them? Ambassador Iril of the Aquarian Collective finally spoke, her voice rippling with something between pity and disgust. You studied their history for 3 months and learned nothing. Let me educate you in 30 seconds. She pulled up a historical archive, images flickering past in rapid succession. Humans survived ice ages that would have killed our species. They crossed oceans in wooden boats, not knowing if land existed on the other side. They went to war with themselves so many times they named the wars by number: World War I, World War II. They split the atom and immediately wondered if they could use it to reach the stars. The images shifted. They built computers to break codes, then used those computers to land on their own moon, with technology less powerful than what we use in children's toys. When disease threatened to wipe them out, they invented medicine. When famine came, they engineered crops. When their own planet tried to kill them with storms and earthquakes and floods, they built cities that could withstand it all. Iril's form shimmered with intensity. And you thought insulting them would make them controllable? You thought mocking their flags and their ancestors would make them easy to manipulate? I thought you didn't think. Vex roared, his patience finally breaking. You saw a species that fights among itself and assumed they were weak. You didn't understand that fighting is how they solve problems. It's how they innovate. It's how they grow stronger. The holographic display zoomed in on the consequences. The ship was close enough now that they could see details. Weapon ports, armor plating that looked like it had been through actual combat. And along the hull, written in letters 10 meters tall, "This is your only warning." 6 minutes, the human voice said, and this time there was no pretense of diplomacy. Just cold, calculated intent. Oak looked around the chamber desperately. What do I do? Lyris drifted closer, and for the first time Oak saw something in her ancient eyes that made his organs freeze. Pity. You have 2 choices, she said quietly. Surrender yourself and face human justice, or hide here and let us all face human wrath. They wouldn't dare attack the council, wouldn't they? Thress pulsed weakly. Oak, they invented a concept called mutually assured destruction, and then stared at it for 50 years without blinking. They built weapons that could end their own species and kept them ready to fire at a moment's notice, betting that their enemies loved life more than they loved revenge. Vex pulled up one final image, a human military academy, its motto carved in stone, peace through superior firepower. That's not a joke, Vex said. That's their philosophy. They don't want peace because they're gentle. They want peace because they know exactly how good they are at war, and they know you don't. The communication console came alive one more time. 3 minutes, Council. After that, we stop asking nicely. Oak's legs gave out. He collapsed onto the chamber floor, his diplomatic robes pooling around him like a funeral shroud. I didn't know, he whispered. I didn't know they were like this. Everyone knows, Lyris said sadly. It's why most species leave them alone. It's why the smart ones trade with them, learn from them, and never, ever make them angry. She gestured to the display, where the consequences was now close enough that they could see fighters launching from its bays. Small, deadly craft that moved with a precision that spoke of thousands of hours of training. You united them. Oak. You took 200 nations with 200 different grudges and gave them one target, one purpose, one enemy. Vex's voice was almost gentle now. And that enemy is you. Oak looked up at the council representatives, beings from species ancient and powerful, wise and terrible. Not one of them would meet his eyes. 2 minutes, the human voice said. And somewhere in the distance, Oak heard something that made his biological panic response trigger completely. The sound of docking clamps engaging. The humans weren't waiting for a decision. They were already boarding. The final lesson. The sound of boots on Starstone echoed through the council chamber. Not the soft padding of diplomatic slippers. Not the clicking of ceremonial talons. This was the synchronized rhythm of soldiers who had drilled together until movement became instinct. Until purpose became identity. The massive chamber doors, designed to withstand meteor strikes and energy weapons, opened smoothly. No explosion. No forced entry. The humans had simply overridden 10,000 years of security protocols in less than 2 minutes. 6 figures entered. They wore armor that was clearly functional rather than decorative. Matte black plating covered vital areas, but the suits were lighter than most military gear in the galaxy. Designed for speed and flexibility. Each soldier carried weapons that looked almost primitive compared to plasma rifles and disruptor cannons. But every council member in the chamber knew the truth. Humanity had perfected the art of kinetic warfare. Their bullets didn't need exotic particles or energy cells. Just physics. Just momentum. Just the certainty that when a human pulled a trigger, something died. The lead figure removed her helmet. She was younger than Oak had expected. Dark hair pulled back in a practical knot. Brown eyes that held the kind of calm that comes from seeing terrible things and surviving them. A name patch on her armor read, Commander Sarah Chen, Terra United Response Force Galactic Council, she said, her voice filling the chamber without need for amplification. We appreciate your prompt compliance with docking procedures. It wasn't a thank you. It was a statement of dominance. Council member Vex stepped forward carefully, hands visible, posture non-threatening. Commander Chen, we acknowledge your arrival. Surely we can resolve this through diplomatic channels. Chen's expression didn't change. Diplomat Orkash violated 17 provisions of the Galactic Treaty, committed acts of cultural warfare against a sovereign species, and deliberately incited conflict that could have resulted in billions of casualties. She pulled out a small device, a human data pad, and read from it with the dry precision of someone documenting evidence. He desecrated the Hiroshima Peace Memorial. He vandalized the graves at Normandy. He spat on the flag at the United Nations. He mocked survivors of genocide in Rwanda. He laughed at the Taj Mahal. He called the Great Wall of China a monument to weakness. He told Aboriginal elders their culture was primitive mythology. With each item, Oak seemed to shrink further into himself. He spent 3 months touring Earth, Chen continued, systematically insulting every culture, every nation, every tradition we hold sacred, not out of ignorance, out of calculated malice. She closed the datapad and looked directly at Oak. Did we miss anything? Oak couldn't speak. His mandibles clicked uselessly, producing no words, just the sound of biological panic. Ambassador Lyris floated forward slowly. Commander, we understand your grievance. But surely there are procedures. There are, Chen interrupted. We followed them. We filed formal complaints with the Council. We provided evidence of his violations. We waited the mandatory 48 hours for your response. She gestured to her soldiers who hadn't moved from their positions by the door. We received no response, so we responded ourselves. Thress pulsed an apologetic yellow. The bureaucracy. These things take time. You had time, Chen said flatly. We gave you time. You chose not to act, so we chose for you. Vex's reptilian eyes narrowed. You understand what you're doing here? You're violating Council sovereignty. You're threatening the balance of power that has kept this galaxy stable for millennia. For the first time, Chen smiled. It was not a warm expression. With respect, Council Member Vex, that balance only existed because humanity wasn't part of the equation. Now we are. She walked slowly toward Oak, her boots clicking on the ancient stone. The other council members unconsciously moved back, creating a clear path. You want to know what Oak did wrong? Chen asked the chamber. It wasn't insulting us. Humans can take an insult. We've been insulting each other for millennia. It's practically our love language. A few nervous sounds rippled through the council, what might have been laughter in other circumstances. No, Chen continued, stopping a few meters from Oak. His mistake was thinking we wouldn't notice, that we'd just absorb the humiliation and move on, that we were too divided, too weak, too primitive to respond. She crouched down to Oak's level, her voice dropping to something almost conversational. We have a saying on Earth. Talk shit. Get hit. You talked shit about every culture on our planet. Now you're going to get hit. Oak finally found his voice. What? What are you going to do to me? Chen stood, pulling out a set of restraints. Simple magnetic cuffs, nothing exotic. You're going to stand trial. On Earth. In front of representatives from every nation you insulted. You'll have legal representation. You'll have due process. We're not monsters, Oak. She gestured to her soldiers who moved forward with practiced efficiency. But you are going to face justice, human justice. And I'll tell you right now, it's going to be very, very uncomfortable. As the soldiers secured Oak's forearms, he looked desperately at the council. Please, don't let them take me. I'm a council diplomat. I have rights. Ambassador Irrell's form rippled with something that might have been satisfaction. You did have rights. You forfeited them when you chose to wage cultural warfare against an entire species. Besides, Vex added, his voice carrying a hint of dark amusement, we're curious to see what human justice looks like. Consider it a diplomatic learning opportunity. Chen's team had Oak secured in less than 30 seconds. Professional, efficient, no unnecessary force, but no gentleness either. As they moved toward the door, Chen paused and turned back to the council. One more thing, she said. The council had a choice today. You could have acted when we filed our complaints. You could have acknowledged the violation and dispensed justice according to your own laws. You didn't. Her eyes swept across every council member, and in that gaze was something that made even ancient beings uncomfortable. So let this be a lesson for the entire galaxy. Humanity doesn't need permission to defend itself. We don't need council approval to seek justice. We don't need your ancient weapons or your reality-warping technology. She tapped her chest plate, where the Terra United insignia was emblazoned, the blue marble earth surrounded by stars. We have something better. We have 7 billion angry humans who just found out someone insulted every single one of their cultures in the same month. Do you know what happens when you give 7 billion humans a common enemy? Silence. You get 7 billion solutions to the same problem. 7 billion people who will figure out faster, cheaper, and more creative ways to make you regret your choices. 7 billion minds that evolved on a death world and decided that surviving wasn't enough. They wanted to thrive. Chen started walking again, her team flanking Oak as they moved toward the exit. We're taking Oak, she said over her shoulder. He'll face trial. He'll serve his sentence. And then maybe we'll return him to you, as a reminder of what happens when you underestimate humanity. The soldiers and their prisoner reached the doorway. Oak, somehow finding a last shred of diplomatic courage, called out, "You can't do this. The other species will unite against you. You'll be isolated, alone." Chen stopped, turned, and her smile was now genuinely amused. Alone? Oak, we spent our entire history alone. Alone on a planet that tried to kill us with weather, disease, predators, and our own stupidity. We thrived. Then we went to space alone and thrived there too. She gestured to the council chamber, to the assembled representatives of a dozen species. The difference is, now you know we're here. Now you know what happens when you mess with humans. Now you get to make a choice. And what choice? Ambassador Lyris asked quietly. Chen's expression became serious. Professional, the look of someone delivering terms. Trade with us, learn from us, work with us as equals, or... She let the word hang in the air like a sword. Find out what humanity looks like when we're not being diplomatic. With that, Commander Sarah Chen and her team walked out of the Galactic Council chamber, taking Oak with them. The doors closed behind them with a sound like a chapter ending. For a long moment, nobody in the council chamber moved. Finally, Vex spoke, his voice carrying a mixture of respect and fear. Well, that was educational. Thress pulsed a confused green. What do we do now? Ambassador Lyris, ancient and wise, drifted to the center of the chamber. Her form seemed to solidify slightly, becoming more substantial, more real. We do what we should have done from the beginning, she said. We treat humanity as what they've always been, survivors, innovators. And now, whether we like it or not. She looked at the doors where the humans had exited. Equals. Irrell's form rippled in agreement. Should we send a formal apology? More than that, Vex said, standing straighter. We should send ambassadors, real ones. Not fools like Oak who think cultural warfare is a valid diplomatic strategy. And we should update the precursor warnings, Thress added. Add a new one. What would it say? Someone asked. Ambassador Lyris turned to the holographic displays, where the consequences was already departing, its engines burning bright as it accelerated away from council space. It should say what we all just learned, she said quietly. Never underestimate humanity. Never insult all of them at once. And never ever make them angry enough to unite. She paused, then added with something that might have been respect. Because when humans unite, they don't just seek justice. They become it. On the displays, the consequences jumped to faster-than-light travel, carrying Oak toward a fate that every being in the galaxy would hear about, remember, and learn from. The message was clear. You can negotiate with humanity. You can trade with them. You can even compete with them, but you don't mess with them. Because if you do, oh, you're finished.